Tyrion, the third head of the dragon. What? Tyrion Lannister? He's gonna ride a dragon? I mean, shouldn't he be riding a lion or something? Where's Aslan when you need him, you know? What, is Tyrion gonna make himself a special saddle to ride the dragon, just like he made a special saddle for Bran to ride a horse? Oh, what's that? All the dragon riders will actually need saddles since Dany was riding on Drogon bareback? Oh, well, Tyrion couldn't possibly help with all his extensive knowledge of dragon lore, which probably exceeds that of anyone now living. That's crazy talk. I mean, Tyrion only dreams about riding dragons and fighting alongside dragons from his childhood to about the middle of A Dance with Dragons, the book. He's only spent his entire life obsessing about dragons, learning everything he can about dragons, kindling fires in the bowels of Casterly Rock, and literally imagining dragons that will burn his enemies, meaning his family members, to ash. Well, yeah, that guy, Tyrion, you know, the guy who's borrowing books about dragons from the Winterfell library, who's pining away for the rarest of dragon books that may or may not be locked in the vaults of the Citadel or in the secret libraries of the old blood behind the black walls of Volantis. If Tyrion could just find a way in there, then he could get to the library and look for dragon books, because that's his thing. And of course, Jon Connington and Halden Halfmaester have Tyrion writing down everything he knows about dragon lore into a book, and we all expect him to soon be advising Daenerys on how to handle her 3 dragons, which again, all need saddles. And actually, Tyrion is already mentally volunteering to ride one of the 3 dragons, which he can't help but notice there's only 1 rider and 3 dragons so far. Now, to the best of our knowledge, it does help quite a bit to be a blood of the dragon person if you want to ride a dragon. And as luck would have it, Tyrion may very well, don't know if you heard about this, may be the son of Joanna Lannister and King Aerys Targaryen. In fact, the video you're watching right now is actually part 2 of a 2-part mega Tyrion Targaryen video, with part 1, Aerys plus Joanna equals Tyrion, covering all the story and plot logistics and angles on this theory. All the stuff about Tywin, Aerys and Joanna, Tyrion's relationship to Tywin, and certainly Tyrion's conversations with Jon Snow in A Game of Thrones, which are heavy laden with sort of matching clues about both of them being royal Targaryen bastards. I also got into the fact that Tyrion's mysterious physical features would be well explained by him being Aerys' son, which in turn led us to Chimera Theory, which, in case you missed that, you're going to want to go back for that. That's about as much fun, as much weird fun as you can have with an actually plausible but extremely strange Song of Ice and Fire theory. Part 2 here will charge headlong into Tyrion's dragon dreams, dragon symbolism, dragon literary clues, dragon foreshadowing, including which dragon he could ride and other predictions, and even draconic figures from real-world mythology from which George drew inspiration to fashion Tyrion Targaryen / Lannister, whose real name would be Tyrion Hill. Thanks. I know, yes. And then, naturally, per the title of the video, we'll discuss things like Tyrion's relationship to fAegon, Daenerys, and Jon, Tyrion's Azor Ahai symbolism, and how Tyrion fits into the 3 heads of the dragon prophecy fulfillment end of the story. Now, if you haven't watched part 1 and you're eager to get to all the stuff I just talked about, you can watch this one first and then circle back. However, I did write this all as one big essay, so the best viewing experience is probably part 1 and part 2, but hey, I'm just thankful you're here watching my videos, so you do it however you want to do. And of course, I'll put a link to part 1 in the description, and with that said, let's talk about Tyrion Targaryen, 3rd head of the dragon. All right, so before we dive into all of Tyrion's many dragon dreams, let's have a quick word about dragon dreams in general and how they work. Because as everyone knows, Targaryens dream of dragons. Pretty much all of them.
Well, that's right, Dave, especially me. I mean, I've been dreaming of dragons a lot lately.
Oh, hey, Rhaegar. I see you've borrowed my Mantis Sleep Pro mask again. Without permission. Again.
Well, yes, Dave, yes, I did. And frankly, you're going to have a hard time getting it back from me because I am communicating to you straight from the dream world.
From the dream world? How are you talking to me from the dream world when I'm out here?
Well, Dave, your Mantis Sleep Pro mask is so lightweight and so comfortable and so relaxing and provides such a 100% total blackout that I've been sleeping a lot better lately. And my dreaming powers have increased and now I live here whenever I want to.
Well, no one ever accused you of having 2 feet planted in reality, that's for sure.
What I really love about your sleep mask is how easy it was for me to readjust the position of the eye cup so that it perfectly fits my face.
You know, you could just get your own. I mean, the Mantis Sleep website does have all kinds of discounts this month, and I even have my own special promo code, David, that'll save you an extra 10% off.
Well, Dave, I don't know. Stealing your mask was really a lot of fun.
Well, Rhaegar, what you probably don't realize is that I have another Manta Pro sleep mask.
Oh, no.
And that I can easily just put it on like this and come find you.
Like this. Haha, now I've got you.
Haha, think again, Dave.
Wait, what happened? Where'd you go?
Well, you see, I used that brief moment when the veils were thin to trade places with you, and now you're stuck in the dreaming, and I have my own YouTube channel.
Damn it, Rhaegar, this is getting really convoluted here.
So friends, if you want to support my new YouTube channel,
Rhaegar, it's still my channel.
and get deeper, more restful sleep, then you too can join the Pro Nap movement by clicking on our custom link in the description below the video and using promo code David at checkout for an extra 10% off.
And in all seriousness, guys, I've been using my Manta Sleep Mask pretty much any time I sleep when the sun is up, which is quite a lot, because I am an original member of the Pro Nap movement. I've been napping for years. And thanks to all of you who got a sleep mask last time. A lot of you did. I appreciate that. And again, you can get 10% off right now with promo code David. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video and future videos. They are a long-term David Lightbringer partner, so check them out. And Rhaegar, you better get out of my chair or you're gonna get teleport-eated when I take this mask off and take back my YouTube channel.
Oh my. Targaryens dream of dragons. Everyone knows that, and in fact, it's not even that rare. The more we learn about House Targaryen, the more it seems like most Targaryens have dragon dreams, at least sometimes. For example, Maester Aemon and his three brothers, Aerion, Egg, and Daeron the Drunkard, they all had dragon dreams, so that's 4 out of 4 brothers in a single family. And Tyrion, well, it seems like he's having dragon dreams from his youth all the way through A Dance with Dragons, where he has one on page. And this, perhaps, to me, is the biggest clue that he is a Targaryen. Although I do have to say, the logistical clues, once you gather them together, they are pretty compelling as well. But yeah, if Tyrion isn't a Targaryen, why is he dreaming of dragons so damn much? That's hard to explain. And it is true that in the Arianne sample chapter of The Winds of Winter, which we just read on a live stream recently, check out the live streams tab of our YouTube channel, little Tiora Toland, little Tiora of House Toland, who is not a Targaryen to the best of our information, despite the dragon on the sigil of House Toland. That's just a nod to the time they tweaked Aegon the Conqueror's nose by sending their fool out dressed in armor as a champion to fight Aegon with Blackfire. Well, Tiora apparently dreams of dragons coming to Westeros and causing destruction. She's overhearing all the adults talk about the mysterious soldiers that are landing all over the Stormlands and the West Coast, which we know, but they don't, are actually fAegon and Jon Conn's Golden Company troops. And then suddenly Tiora just blurts out, "It's dragons," following up with, "They were dancing in my dream, and everywhere the dragons danced, the people died." So fAegon, of course, isn't actually bringing any dragons, he's bringing elephants. But he is a Blood of the Dragon person coming to dance in Westeros, a dance with dragons. It's about the people, more than the dragons. So yeah, fAegon, he's coming to Westeros, a dragon person, to contest for the Iron Throne, probably with Daenerys, and also with Tyrion if Tyrion is on Team Dany, which he seems like he will be. In other words, there can be little doubt that draconic violence is on its way to Westeros. So I think it does make sense that any potentially psychic people in Westeros, and apparently Tiora is psychic for some reason, might pick up on this as a premonition, might have a dream warning of the violence to come. This reminds me a lot of the Red Wedding, which was foreseen by psychics all over the world, from the Ghost of Highheart to Patchface to the Undying Ones of Karth. And that is basically the one exception. Every other person that dreams of dragons is a Targaryen. Even little Shireen, who dreams of dragons coming to eat her, likely a premonition of being consumed in Jon Snow's resurrection pyre, which will be like a dragon hatching. Check out the Melisandre's Fate and also the Fire White Ghost video. But of course, Shireen's great-grandmother was a Targaryen, Rhaelle Targaryen, who married Lord Ormond Baratheon and was in turn the father of Steffon Baratheon, who was the father of Stannis, Robert, and Renly. Ergo, Shireen's dragon dream could be explained by her dragon blood or by the fact that she's having a death premonition, or both. And apart from Tiora Toland and Shireen Baratheon, all the prophetic dragon dreams are experienced by people we think of as classic Targaryens. There's Aegon the Conqueror, of course, who seems to have some sort of dream about the new war for the Dawn and the prince that was promised. Daenys the Dreamer, who dreamt of the doom of Valyria before it happened. Daenerys, of course, she sees Drogon twice in dreams before he's hatched. I mentioned Egg and Aemon and their brothers. Maester Aemon says the dragon dreams killed them, every one. So Aerion, he drank wildfire, presumably after dreaming of turning into a dragon. Daeron the Drunkard was the most prolific dreamer. He dreamt of all kinds of stuff, including dragons returning and the death of Baelor Breakspear. We can assume that Egg, aka Aegon V, had some sort of dream about hatching hatching dragons, and that's what led to Summerhall. And of course, Maester Aemon, talking to Sam, tells him about how he can still see the color red and dreams of the red comet, dreams of dragons, and even sees the dragons in some sort of snowy northern environment, which means that he is probably catching a glimpse of the War for the Dawn 2.0 that's coming in a book soon to theaters near you. Then we have my favorite dragon dreamer, John the Fiddler, aka Daemon Blackfire. Spoiler alert, he's another Daemon Blackfire, the second one. And he, of course, dreamt of a dragon hatching at White Walls, as well as Dunk joining the Kingsguard, both of which came true, but not in the way that John the Fiddler imagined. And then in the almost certainly but not confirmed category, we have the first Rhaena Targaryen, who named her dragon Dreamfire, and who began the custom of putting unhatched dragon's eggs in the cradles with young Targaryens. And of course, Rhaegar, probably a dragon dreamer. Almost everything he did seems based on prophecy and dreams and Prince That Was Promised stuff. And probably Mad King Aerys. He was going crazy and thought he could transform himself into a dragon by blowing up King's Landing with wildfire, according to Jaime. So he's probably having dragon dreams too that he's misinterpreting. Now, interestingly, Jon Snow seems to have something of a waking dragon dream in A Dance with Dragons. And this is as he listens to Val talk about Melisandre having seen, quote, kings and dragons in her fires. And by the way, it's Jon Snow that she sees more than anything in her fires. And Jon is, say it with me, a king and a dragon. So anyway, after Val says the phrase kings and dragons, Jon inner monologues thusly. Dragons again. For a moment, Jon could almost see them too, coiling in the night, their dark wings outlined against a sea of flame. So it sounds like Jon can more than just almost see them. It sounds like he's seeing them. That's a visual description. Dark wings outlined against a sea of flame. So is that something from his blood calling out? I mean, Jon's never seen a dragon. And this would be similar to all the Targaryen dragon dreamers who lived post-dragon extinction and yet saw dragons in their dreams anyway. And by way of comparison, there's a similar line with Daenerys in the last chapter of A Dance with Dragons when she's looking for Drogon. And it says she could almost see his dark wings, eating up the stars, I think it is. That makes sense because Dany has seen Drogon before, but again, Jon hasn't seen a dragon. So maybe that is a kind of waking dragon dream. And I actually think that Jon's recurring crypts dream is going to be revealed as a dragon dream when he finally finishes it and gets to the lowest level of the crypts and finds the dragon egg that's down there sending him the dragon dreams. Check out Jon's dragon dream. And also, dreams come from dragons. And I'm dead serious. That's a legit theory. I think that's what's going on. So check out the videos. Let me know what you think. But essentially, this will be a symbol of Jon's buried Targaryen identity. But let's get back to Tyrion. Tyrion Targaryen, it seems, has been getting high on fire since he was a boy. By which I mean his dragon dreams seem to have started when he was a child. "What are you reading about?" he asked. "Dragons," Tyrion told him. "What good is that? There are no more dragons," the boy said with the easy certainty of youth. "So they say," Tyrion replied. "Sad, isn't it? When I was your age, I used to dream of having a dragon of my own." "You did?" the boy said suspiciously. Perhaps he thought Tyrion was making fun of him. "Oh yes, even a stunted, twisted, ugly little boy can look down over the world when he's seated on a dragon's back." Tyrion pushed the bearskin aside and climbed to his feet. "I used to start fires in the bowels of Casterly Rock and stare at the flames for hours, pretending they were dragon fire. Sometimes I'd imagine my father burning, at other times, my sister." Jon Snow was staring at him, a look equal parts horror and fascination. Tyrion guffawed. "Don't look at me that way, bastard. I know your secret. You've dreamt the same kind of dreams." "No," Jon Snow said, horrified. "I wouldn't." So first off, Tyrion is staring into the fires like a Rhaenyra here, visualizing burning his enemies to ash, with his enemies being his family, as ever. And when he says to Jon, "I know you've dreamt the same kinds of dreams," he's clearly talking about having resentment towards your family, feeling like the black sheep, wanting to take their place. However, the ambiguous wording kind of makes it seem like he's saying, "You've dreamt of dragons too, haven't you? I know your secret." And of course, Jon's secret is that he's a dragon. Don't know if you've heard about that. It's R plus L equals J. Unless you think I'm reading too much into the quotes, the chapter actually ends with Jon staring into the fire just like Tyrion said he used to. One by one, the company drifted off to their shelters and to sleep. All but Jon Snow, who had drawn the night's first watch. Tyrion was the last to retire, as always. As he stepped into the shelter his men had built for him, he paused and looked back at Jon Snow. The boy stood near the fire, his face still and hard, looking deep into the flames. Tyrion Lannister smiled sadly and went to bed. So basically, Tyrion's all like, yeah, I used to stare into the fire and visualize riding a dragon and burning my enemies to ash. You've dreamt those dreams too, right? And then Jon takes the first night's watch and stares into the fire and looks for something. He's looking for something in there. Now, admittedly, it does seem like Tyrion is saying, I used to dream of having a dragon of my own, in the same way that you'd say, oh, when I was a kid, I used to dream of being a jet fighter pilot. Or, oh, I used to dream that The Winds of Winter was coming out this Christmas. But the question remains, where did this obsession, where did this yearning for dragons come from? All of the Targaryen dragon dreamers are essentially yearning for the dragons as a result of their dreams. I mean, listen to Maester Aemon, listen to that speech. His dragon dreams are haunting him. And he's sitting there like 100 years old going, man, if I was only 90, I could maybe still ride a dragon and help Dany. But that said, Tyrion actually does imply that he really did dream of dragons as a boy, as opposed to just looking into the fire and imagining dragons. So after telling Jon Snow that, most people lack the courage to face the hard truths in life. And Jon's like, oh, but not you, huh? And Tyrion's like, no, not me. I seldom even dream of dragons anymore. There are no dragons. So once again, I will say that seldom isn't never, by definition. And of course, we will get to a dragon dream that Tyrion has on the page in Dance with Dragons. But yeah, the line implies that he used to dream of dragons even more. And then later in A Dance with Dragons, when Tyrion is hanging out with Illyrio on the way to the Royne to meet fAegon and young Griff. I guess fAegon is young Griff. fAegon and old Griff, who is Jon Connington. Trixie Griffs and fAegons. Tyrion again refers to these childhood dragon dreams. He's drinking wine and dozing off, and he thinks, if I drink enough fire wine, he told himself, perhaps I'll dream of dragons. And then he goes on this tangent. When he was still a lonely child in the depths of Casterly Rock, he oft rode dragons through the nights, pretending he was some lost Targaryen princeling, or Valyrian dragon lord soaring high over fields and mountains. Once, when his uncles asked him what gift he wanted for his name day, he begged them for a dragon. It wouldn't need to be a big one, could be little, like I am. His uncle Garyon had thought that was the funniest thing he had ever heard, but his uncle Tygat said, the last dragon died a century ago, lad. That had seemed so monstrously unfair that the boy had cried himself to sleep that night. Yet if the Lord of Cheese could be believed, the Mad King's daughter had hatched 3 living dragons, 2 more than even a Targaryen should require. So when Tyrion is thinking about oft riding dragons through the night, he definitely could be referring to staring into the fire and imagining dragons like he was talking about. But it also sounds like he's talking about these dragon dreams that he seldom has anymore but used to have. Riding dragons through the night as in his dreams, but then having that carry over to his waking life. And look, he's all ready to sign up for the position of dragon rider. He's like, hey, you got 2 without a rider there. And also take notice again that Tyrion's dragon dreaming is located in the depths of Casterly Rock, creating the Smaug, Fafnir, dragon in a cave full of gold symbolism. And it's also a bit of a dragons waking from stone thing in that Tyrion was born from the rock, just like Monkey Demon King's son Wukong was rock-born as well. And just like Mithras and the dragons that came from the moon and the dragon gargoyles on Dragonstone that blew off the parapets when Dany was born. Stormborn, big storm. Shook the microphone. And so, as Tyrion and Illyrio's journey wears on, Tyrion continues to pine away for the fjord. No, for dragons. Outside the litter, night had fallen. Inside, all was dark. Tyrion listened to Illyrio's snores, the creak of the leather straps, the slow clop-clop of the team's iron-shod hooves on the hard Valyrian road, but his heart was listening for the beat of leathern wings. Listening for those dragons. They gotta be around here somewhere, guys. They're bound to show up any minute. And apparently Tyrion does drink enough fire wine, goes to sleep, and dreams of dragons. That night, Tyrion Lannister dreamed of a battle that turned the hills of Westeros as red as blood. He was in the midst of it, dealing death with an axe as big as he was, fighting side by side with Barristan the Bold and Bittersteel as dragons wheeled across the sky above them. In the dream, he had 2 heads, both noseless. His father led the enemy, so he slew him once again. Then he killed his brother, Jaime, hacking at his face until it was a red ruin, laughing every time he struck a blow. Only when the fight was finished did he realize that his second head was weeping. All right, so Tyrion, god of war, is warring on the Lannisters, first Tywin and then Jaime, with one of his heads rejoicing in the slaughter, but the other weeping. It definitely seems easy to interpret that as his Lannister half weeping and his Targaryen half rejoicing, as well as it just being a general clue about Tyrion's split nature. Dragons are wheeling in the sky above, and since this battle is in Westeros, and since he's fighting with Ser Barristan, who is, Dany's right-hand man, this seems like kind of a pretty standard prophetic Targaryen dragon dream here. Tyrion is seeing some version of the dragon carnage that will surely unfold in Westeros. And this sounds pretty similar to what we saw on the show, where Tyrion is allied with Dany and ends up fighting against the Lannisters, and we'd expect this to be a conflict for Tyrion, and that's essentially what the dream seems to depict. Now, kind of what's happening here is that Tyrion has just been thinking about and talking about all these famous Targaryens, namely these Blackfire captains, Bittersteel and Meleys the Monstrous. And so that's why Tyrion has two heads in the dream. He is Meleys the Monstrous, who was actually slain by Ser Barristan the Bold, who's also in the dream. Check out our Meleys the Monstrous livestream that we just did. Bittersteel, of course, is another Targaryen royal bastard, just like Tyrion may be. And Tyrion actually has set in motion the 7th Blackfire Rebellion by whispering into fAegon's ear. And then, of course, Tyrion will help Dany invade Westeros after that. So these parallels to Meleys the Monstrous and Bittersteel make a lot of sense. And just to make sure I'm saying the obvious thing, Tyrion and Meleys make especially good parallels because they both have these very visible physical birth conditions, which causes everyone to, in their prejudice, again, medieval prejudice, think that they are monstrous. And because of the whole leading dragon invasions of Westeros thing. Now, speaking of Targaryen royal bastards and dragon dreamers, Tyrion is also similar in many ways to Bloodraven, who I didn't mention in the list of dragon dreamers. He's a little bit more than a dragon dreamer. He's a green seer, but he probably had some dragon dreams too. Who knows? But yeah, Tyrion and Bloodraven both have distinctive physical markings. Bloodraven is an albino, and he's got that wine-stained birthmark on his face. And Tyrion is a dwarf with mismatched eyes. Both served quite ably as Hand of the King, ferreting out all kinds of nefarious plots and schemes. However, both were nonetheless mistrusted by the public. Tyrion is called the Imp and the Twisted Monkey Demon, and Bloodraven is widely regarded as some sort of fell sorcerer. Tyrion and Bloodraven were both wounded or even mutilated, you might say, in defense of their kings. Tyrion lost most of his nose at the Battle of the Blackwater, fighting for Joffrey, whereas Bloodraven lost one of his eyes, fighting Bittersteel at Redgrass Field. And then we've got Bloodraven's white hair and Tyrion's nearly white hair. So there may be more. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, I thought that was worth mentioning. All right, let's talk about Obsession, the new fragrance sweeping the high halls of old Valyria. Now, I'm talking about obsession with dragons, of course. And a moment ago, we read about Tyrion mentioning to Jon that he was reading about dragons in a book that he checked out from the Winterfell library. With Ned's permission, I might add, I don't think you want to run afoul of the Winterfell library late book policy. I'm not sure what that is, but
I, Eddard, of the House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, sentence you to die.
Oh, well, anyway, moving right along. It does turn out that Tyrion reads or has read every book about dragons that he can possibly find, because he has been basically obsessed with dragons his entire life. This is a major part of his character. Tyrion reflects on this in A Dance with Dragons while aboard the Shy Maid with the totally not the 7th Blackfire Rebellion, you guys. Tyrion had read much and more of dragons through the years. The greater part of those accounts were idle tales and could not be relied on. And the books that Illyrio had provided them were not the ones he might have wished for. What he really wanted was the complete text of the Fires of the Freehold, Galendro's History of Valyria. No complete copy was known to Westeros, however. Even the Citadels lacked 27 scrolls. They must have a library in Old Volantis, surely. I may find a better copy there, if I can find a way inside the black walls to the city's heart. He was less hopeful concerning Septon Barth's dragons, worms, and wyverns, their unnatural history. Barth had been a blacksmith's son who rose to be the king's hand during the reign of Jaehaerys the Conciliator. His enemies always claimed he was more sorcerer than Septon. Baelor the Blessed had ordered all Barth's writings destroyed when he came to the Iron Throne. 10 years ago, Tyrion had read a fragment of unnatural history that had eluded the blessed Baelor, but he doubted that any of Barth's work had found its way across the Narrow Sea. And of course, there was even less chance of his coming on the fragmentary, anonymous, blood-soaked tome, sometimes called Blood and Fire. and sometimes the death of dragons, the only surviving copy of which was supposedly hidden away in a locked vault beneath the citadel. When the half-maester appeared on deck, yawning, the dwarf was writing down what he recalled concerning the mating habits of dragons, on which subject Barth, Munkin, and Tomax held markedly divergent views. Yeah, I mean, I've honestly been wondering about the mating habits of dragons myself, since we've never ever heard of any dragons getting freaky or horny on page at all. And since we don't really understand which dragons are male and female and how that works, or if it's like Jurassic Park and one of them could switch because they have frog DNA spliced in there, I mean, we really just do not know. Perhaps that's why there are divergent views. So not only does Tyrion seem to know everything there is to know about dragons, he even knows about the different arguments and opinions from the most prestigious scholars to ever study the matter, which is a lot like you and I know all the different arguments about who's a secret Targaryen and who's Azor Ahai, whether ancient Andal's theory is true, whether Great Empire of the Dawn theory is true. The YouTube theorists in the fandom held markedly divergent views. So Tyrion is one of those people hanging out on Reddit too much and watching the YouTube videos over and over, and we see you out there. We love you. Thank you. Griff and Halden Halfmaester understand this, and so they are having Tyrion write down a new compendium of dragon lore, which, when it's finished, will probably be the best such book existent anywhere in the world. Just the sort of thing that Daenerys might like to read. And even though he's writing the book for Team fAegon, obviously he's carrying that knowledge to Dany. Now, Tyrion's obsession with dragons is even evident in his sarcasm and his quips. So, for example, when Illyrio is sketching out his grand plans, which include more than a few ambitious promises, Tyrion thinks to himself, "Next, you will be offering me a suit of magic armor and a palace in Valyria." Of course, Euron Crowseye, who also has mismatched eyes like Tyrion, he has a magic suit of Valyrian armor. So maybe Tyrion is descended from people who had palaces in Valyria and wore such armor. Then when Tyrion is brooding on his ill reputation in King's Landing back in A Clash of Kings, he complains that every witness will tell a worse tale until I seem as bad as Maegor the Cruel and Aerys the Mad together, with a pinch of Aegon the Unworthy for spice. So, in case you haven't noticed, the list of Targaryens that Tyrion has compared himself to or been compared to is growing long, and maybe that's because he is a Targaryen. I'm just saying. Here's another draconic sarcasm, perhaps my favorite, this time in A Clash of Kings on the rare occasion when Tyrion is witness Cersei crying. It never happens. Tyrion Lannister could not have been more astonished if Aegon the Conqueror himself had burst into the room, riding on a dragon and juggling lemon pies. It's actually highly appropriate that Tyrion might think about Aegon the Conqueror as a dragon-riding fool, juggling pies. Because Tyrion may ride a dragon, may be descended from Aegon the Conqueror, and of course Tyrion has a lot of fool symbolism. The motley he wears on the Shy Maid, the time he walked on his hands at the table and his father was like, my son's on a fool. I think that's what he said. I think there was a no son of mine thrown in there. And in any case, Tyrion, he wants dragons so badly that he's even seeing them in the clouds, thoughtfully musing on the wonder of seeing a dragon in flight. Dragons had been much in his thoughts of late, and after he drinks, he wakes up and has them fighting in his head. And in all seriousness, there's no other character in the story who obsesses about dragons more than Tyrion, except perhaps Melisandre. And that's her entire raison d'etre, which means reason for existing. And speaking of Melisandre, the one time that a Red Priest meets Tyrion, he gets pretty excited. "Someone told me that the night is dark and full of terrors. What do you see in those flames?" "Dragons," Moqorro said in the common tongue of Westeros. He spoke it very well, with hardly a trace of accent. No doubt that was one reason the High Priest Benero had chosen him to bring the faith of R'hllor to Daenerys Targaryen. "Dragons old and young, true and false, bright and dark, and you, a small man with a big shadow, snarling in the midst of all." So there's Tyrion the Giant Shadow King again. I guess that first time was in part 1. That was when he was walking into the feast hall at Castle Black, leaving Jon outside staring at the fire, and Tyrion's shadow made him as tall as a king. And then, of course, Jon has a matching scene with Mel in A Dance with Dragons, the same thing, a giant's shadow on the wall. So here again, Tyrion, the small man, casting a giant shadow, and you can sort of see what's going on here. Moqorro meets him, and he's like, "Oh man, you're someone who's going to shake the world," more or less. And also, "Oh man, look at you surrounded by dragons." And so famously, this is an old fandom debate, the wording here is ambiguous. Is Tyrion simply amongst the dragons, or is he one of the dragons? To me, it sounds like he is one of the dragons, and George is just, trying to leave a clue that isn't too obvious. But at the very least, we can see that Tyrion's plot revolves around, or I guess you could say it's surrounded by dragons. And when you connect that to the fact that he's been obsessed with them since his childhood, you can see his entire life has been about dragons, and that is only increasing. The dragon is only intensifying. Tyrion has already met Jon and then fAegon, and he's on the way to meet Dany and her dragons. So we can all see where this is going and what this is about. It's not about lions. Sorry, Aslan. Tyrion pretty much thinks about all the messed up stuff that people have done to him, killing his family, and dragons. That's pretty much it. And wouldn't this all just make a lot more sense if, in fact, Tyrion is Aerys' son, Dany's brother, and Jon's uncle? Speaking of the Targaryen obsession with bringing back their dragons, we of course know that 3 of them tried to do that with wildfire. Egg, King Aegon V at Summerhall, Aerion Brightflame, who, glug glug glug, tried to drink the wildfire, and of course Mad King Aerys, who tried to use wildfire to blow up King's Landing and turn himself into a dragon. And wouldn't you know it, Tyrion, who may also be a Targaryen, he strikes up a relationship with the alchemist too. And you'll remember he has the brilliant idea to use the wildfire to defend King's Landing. Jaime thinks Aerys would have loved it, and this is from A Storm of Swords. Did you know that my brother set the Blackwater Rush afire? Wildfire will burn on water. Aerys would have bathed in it if he dared. The Targaryens were all mad for fire. So this would be an interesting and compelling potential inverted parallel. Aerys tried to burn down King's Landing with wildfire, and here is his son, potentially Tyrion, saving King's Landing with wildfire. That could potentially be a promising sign for a Tyrion redemption arc, except for that, oh yeah, the people of King's Landing screwed him over hardcore, and now he's more likely to burn the city down. We'll come back to that idea in a moment, but let's check out the scene when Tyrion visits the alchemist, where we learn that he is following in the footsteps of 3 generations of Targaryens. The substance flows through my veins and lives in the heart of every pyromancer. We respect its power, but the common soldier, the crew of one of the Queen's Spitfires say in the unthinking frenzy of battle, any little mistake can bring catastrophe. That cannot be said too often. My father often told King Aerys as much as his father told old King Jaehaerys. They must have listened, Tyrion said. If they had burned the city down, someone would have told me. In other words, the Wisdom's grandfather counseled Jaehaerys II, who might be Tyrion's grandfather. And the Wisdom's father counseled Mad King Aerys, who would be Tyrion's father. And then here he is with Tyrion recounting all this. So this could be 3 consecutive generations of alchemists advising 3 consecutive generations of Targaryens on how to blow stuff up with wildfire. And then when Tyrion finally unleashes the wildfire, the Jade Demon as it's called, against Stannis' army, well, it makes him feel like a Targaryen whom you may have heard of before. A dozen great fires raged under the city walls where casks of burning pitch had exploded, but the wildfire reduced them to no more than candles in a burning house, their orange and scarlet pennons fluttering insignificantly against the jade holocaust. The low clouds caught the color of the burning river and roofed the sky in shades of shifting green, eerily beautiful, a terrible beauty, like dragon fire. Tyrion wondered if Aegon the Conqueror had felt like this as he flew above his field of fire. So Tyrion is essentially doing the same thing that he used to do under Casterly Rock as a boy, staring into the fire and imagining dragons, except that now the fire is much bigger and it's making him feel like Aegon the Conqueror. And yes, this certainly could foreshadow Tyrion being the one to more directly be responsible for potentially burning down some or all of King's Landing with wildfire, as opposed to Daenerys, who has a track record of, looking out for civilians, at least in the books. Tyrion, meanwhile, he's got that huge grudge against the people of King's Landing who mocked him at the trial and didn't appreciate all his good governance as hand. So perhaps this will be an error of omission thing where Tyrion simply doesn't mention to Dany that there may or may not be huge caches of wildfire all around the city. Or perhaps Tyrion will be riding a dragon and laying waste to the city and setting off wildfire directly. Either way, this certainly could be foreshadowing of Tyrion looking down on a dragon-burned King's Landing and thinking, my work here is complete. And now it's time to talk about Azor Ahai affairs, because just as Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow have many scenes in which they do Azor Ahai stuff, Tyrion Lannister Targaryen Hill has several scenes in which he performs some version of waking dragons from stone or killing/copulating with Nissa Nissa to make Lightbringer in some form, which I take for clues that he will ride a dragon, and in some way that is probably more cryptic than Jon and Dany, check off the boxes for the Azor Ahai Reborn, prince that was promised prophecy. Everyone from Melisandre to Maester Aemon to Rhaegar consider those two prophecies, Azor Ahai Reborn and the prince that was promised, to be the same prophecy. And we know from Dany's House of the Undying vision of Rhaegar that Rhaegar thought that the idea of 3 heads has the dragon equates to 3 chosen heroes or saviors. You'll have to let me know in the comments how you would characterize what George would seem to be doing here with prophecy fulfillment and all its tricksy ways. But I'll start by showing you the symbolism, and so here is Tyrion doing Azor Ahai stuff. We actually just read one of the best examples, Tyrion setting the world on fire by awaking the wildfire demon from the clay pots of the alchemists, which are like little stone eggs full of alchemy and fire. And of course, the fire demon itself is what reminds Tyrion of Aegon's dragons and the destruction that they caused. As we mentioned, that scene also has strong parallels to Aerys, Tyrion's potential father, trying to burn down King's Landing with wildfire, which he did in order to wake a dragon, to turn himself into a dragon. He was going to sacrifice thousands of people in King's Landing in what would effectively have been a huge blood magic ritual, again, to wake a dragon. So you can see there's lots of parallels to Azor Ahai mythology here. And then even better, the entire time that Tyrion is sitting there, feeling like Aegon the Conqueror, well, he's perching like a gargoyle, which is appropriate, of course, since gargoyles are supposed to defend churches and castles from evil spirits. And they're mounted up on top of the wall, under the roof, because they're drain spouts. And Tyrion, who made the drains in Casterly Rock flow better than they ever have before, because he's a gargoyle, he's perching up on the walls of King's Landing, the protector of King's Landing from the evil spirit Stannis, who of course is named by the people of King's Landing as the stranger come to judge them. But not today. Tyrion Gargoyle is on the case, and this is the paragraph right before the one where he's imagining how Aegon felt. I'll just put it up on the screen here, and as you can see, motionless as a gargoyle, Tyrion Lannister, hunched on one knee atop a Merlin. He's looking at the desolation where the river itself seems to have taken fire. The kiss of the wildfire is turning these ships into funeral pyres, so think of Drogo's pyre, which is of course Dany's archetypal Lightbringer forging scene. And the men are being turned into living torches, as if Tyrion were Azor Ahai creating a bunch of fire wights as he wakes dragons. And kind of the whole point of making Tyrion a gargoyle is that he is a stone dragon. Not only are many of the gargoyles on Dragonstone dragons, some of them are wyverns and some of them are hellhounds, but many of them are dragons. Not only that, the legend of the first gargoyle, as I mentioned at the top of Tyrion Targaryen Part 1, has to do with dragons. It was a dragon that was menacing a town. They slew it and burned its body, but the head wouldn't burn, it turned to stone, so they mounted it on the church to scare away the other evil spirits. That's obviously the simplified version, but yes, the first gargoyle of legend was a stone dragon, which means that Tyrion, in this scene where he's feeling like Aegon, who comes from Dragonstone, where all the stone dragons are, Tyrion himself is a stone dragon, just waiting to take wing and fly. And as it happens, the other major Tyrion gargoyle quote does have him taking wing and flying, because it's actually that awkward one from a Game of Thrones that George has said doesn't really quite fit his character, where he essentially does a tumbler's cartwheel off of a low roof at Winterfell in front of Jon Snow. So George has said that, yeah, that doesn't really fit with him having a stunted leg. But anyway, here is that scene. Tyrion Lannister was sitting on the ledge above the door to the Great Hall, looking for all the world like a gargoyle. The dwarf grinned down at him. "Is that animal a wolf?" "A dire wolf," Jon said. "His name is Ghost." So that's pretty cool because, as I mentioned in the Fire White Ghost video, all of the Stark direwolf stuff is heavily based on Cerberus, who is the archetypal hellhound. And again, over on Dragonstone, some of the gargoyles are Cerberus, some of them are hellhounds. And Ghost even has his own gargoyle scene sitting atop the ring wall at the Fist of the First Men. So Tyrion the gargoyle, Ghost the gargoyle. I mean, we might as well be on Dragonstone having this conversation about how Jon and Tyrion are both kind of bastards, really, you know? The dragon skulls beneath King's Landing are certainly another good place to find Tyrion doing Azor Ahai stuff. And now that I think about it, Tyrion is pretty much all about every kind of secret dragon tunnel that there is under King's Landing. The dark chamber with the dragon skulls, the subterranean vaults where the alchemists keep their wildfire, and of course the tunnels and secret passages in the walls under the Tower of the Hand in the Red Keep, where Tyrion confronts the three-headed, tiled Targaryen dragon left by Maegor the Cruel. So yeah, that's just Fafnir, you know, slinking around, lurking down in the caverns, doing his thing. And even Tyrion's visit to Tobo Mott's forge to pick up Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, the red Valyrian steel swords with oh so much Lightbringer symbolism, seems like another example of the same idea, which is that on some level, dragons or dragon spirits, they come from the underworld or from beyond the Vale of Tears, and that's where you have to go and bring them back from. And so, along these lines, here is yet another Tyrion is freaking obsessed with dragons quote. Tyrion had a morbid fascination with dragons. When he had first come to King's Landing for his sister's wedding to Robert Baratheon, he had made it a point to seek out the dragon skulls that had hung on the walls of the Targaryens' throne room. King Robert had replaced them with banners and tapestries, but Tyrion had persisted until he found the skulls in the dank cellar where they had been stored. He had expected to find them impressive, perhaps even frightening. He had not thought to find them beautiful, as black as onyx, polished smooth, so the bones seemed to shimmer in the light of his torch. They liked the fire, he sensed. He'd thrust the torch into the mouth of one of the larger skulls and made the shadows leap and dance on the wall behind him. The teeth were long, curving knives of black diamond. The flame of the torch was nothing to them. They had bathed in the heat of far greater fires. When he had moved away, Tyrion could have sworn that the beast's empty eye sockets had watched him go. Tyrion stood in that dank cellar for a long time, staring at Balerion's huge, empty-eyed skull until his torch burned low, trying to grasp the size of the living animal, to imagine how it must have looked when it spread its great black wings and swept across the skies, breathing fire. So as you can see, when Tyrion does look down on his King's Landing wildfire apocalypse and think, this is how Aegon must have felt, it's actually a follow-up to this scene where he's looking at Balerion's skull and thinking how Balerion must have looked. So once again, he's trying to imagine dragons. And by the way, I used to have a small guitar pedal company with a couple of friends of mine called Brimstone Audio, and the most famous musician who used our distortion pedal was probably the bass player from Imagine Dragons. Also, shout out to Jeff Motz, bass player from High on Fire, who's also been using our pedal for years. And I did all of this, by the way, before even starting this podcast. So clearly this is all prophecy, imagining dragons while high on fire and brimstone. I got this license plate over 20 years ago, before YouTube streaming was a thing, because I had a red sports car that was like a streamer. Got a lot of speeding tickets. Anyway, my whole life has been leading up to this. Don't mind me. I was just noticing. Anyway, yes, Tyrion, as we know, he does have a morbid fascination with dragons. He finds them frightening and yet beautiful, and he's thrusting his fiery torch into the dragon's mouth, and making them appear to stir and wake, after which the dragons, seemingly awakened now, are watching him go. They watched him come, too, because he took Shay down there, and they made love. So, again, I apologize, but that scene does also have dragons waking and stirring language, as well as Nissa Nissa symbolism. Tyrion is described as hard as stone, right as the sun begins to rise and illuminate the dragon skulls. Just another stone dragon gargoyle waking with the dawn after a bit of the old Azor Ahai routine. And speaking of the thrusting torch, that wasn't just a lowbrow bit of sex humor. Dany also thrusts her fiery torch into Drogo's pyre to light it and wake the dragons from stone, with both of these fiery torch thrustings meant to symbolize, the sword thrust that forged Lightbringer in the heart of Nissa Nissa, but which also seems to obviously allude to the act of procreation, which can produce a prince that was promised dragon. And then on top of that, the red comet, it's labeled as Mormont's torch. So this is a comet torch Lightbringer being thrust in to light the fire and wake the dragons. You guys see how this works. And of course, I went into this entire scene in a lot more detail in the George's Secret Story video. Now, probably the easiest Tyrion Azor Ahai scene to identify is actually from Tyrion's Winds of Winter sample chapter. Perhaps because George likes to make his clues progressively more obvious as we get closer to the actual event being foreshadowed. So this is the scene where he is with Brown Ben's second sons in the tent, preparing to enter the Battle of Meereen by switching to Dany's side, which is something that Tyrion is strongly encouraging Ben to do, because he can sort of see which way the winds are blowing. And by the way, Sean and Tim and I are actually reading all of these Winds of Winter sample chapters this month on the Sunday live streams. So the Victarion chapter, the Barristan chapter, and the Tyrion chapter, which are describing the beginnings of this battle of fire outside Meereen. You can find those under the live streams tab of the YouTube page. The scene ends with Tyrion picking up a blood-soaked white Syvass dragon game piece. Syvass is obviously chess, and the queens are obviously dragons. So yeah, this could obviously foreshadow Tyrion riding Viserion, the white dragon. So let's read through it real quick. As you can see on the screen, Ser Jorah is doing what he likes to do. He's killing someone with his long sword, with that rider being the younkish envoy who dropped by to complain about the Second Sons not following orders and Tyrion being an escaped slave. Jorah stabs him in the throat, knocking him across the Syvas board and causing him to clutch at the sword, which is drinking his blood in the fullers and turning red. That seems like pretty obvious blood sacrifice to create Lightbringer symbolism. And of course, in the very next paragraph, we see that blood has been offered to the dragon, and the sacrifice has been accepted. So as you can see, that's when Tyrion claims the white dragon, even tossing it into the air as if making it fly. All hail Queen Daenerys, you know? So yeah, if Tyrion rides a dragon, we're all going to look back on this scene and say this was very obvious foreshadowing. And then there's this funny bit right after that where Ben announces, hey, we've always been the Queen's men. And you'll remember Brown Ben and the Second Sons, they actually started on Team Dany. Remember, the dragons even liked Brown Ben, but then he turned his cloak and joined the slavers. So now he's basically saying, oh, I was just doing a deep cover thing. I've always been on Team Dany. That was just a ruse. And the thing is, if the Second Sons help Team Dany win the Battle of Meereen, they'll probably get away with that. Now, as always, there's a ton going on in this scene, so check out the Tyrion Winds of Winter sample chapter live stream for the full breakdown. But real quick, I did just want to point out one other thing that helps tighten all of this up as Tyrion will ride Viserion foreshadowing, and that is the kind of strange fact that the younkish envoy is described as Tyrion's kin as he's being sacrificed to the dragon, because that's how the dragon bond was originally created, I think, by Valyrians sacrificing a kinsman to a dragon by stuffing their spirit into the dragon so that all the living relatives of the sacrificed person will have the potential spirit link to this dragon that contains their ancestor. And check out the Dreams Come From Dragons video for that full story. So when the Yonkishman enters the tent, he's wearing a breastplate, quote, with a scene of such delightful depravity that Tyrion sensed a kindred spirit. And that's why Tyrion looks at him a moment later when he's lying dead on the floor and says, hey, if that breastplate fits, I want it. But if we think about the dragon Viserion, well, he's named after Dany's brother Viserys, who is potentially also Tyrion's brother, and many people think the life of Viserys was one of the sacrifices that paid for the waking of the dragons. So that's essentially what I think is being acted out here, among other things. Tyrion is claiming the white dragon, Viserion, who was awakened with the blood of his kinsman, Viserys, whose kindred spirit may literally be in the dragon, or perhaps just symbolically. And then just to reinforce the idea that the white Syvas dragon drinking the blood of the envoy is actually about the dragon Viserion, we have Viserion literally flying in the air outside of the tent, eating corpses as all of this is happening. And those are the plague corpses that are being catapulted into the air. Viserion is chomping them down because dragons are hungry. Speaking of feeding people to hungry dragons, killer segue alert, come on. The other Tyrion Syvas dragon scene might be foreshadowing fAegon getting eaten by one of Dany's dragons with a little help from Tyrion. This scene is definitely one of my favorites in A Dance with Dragons, and as you can see on the screen, it begins with fAegon arranging his pieces in a, quote, young man's formation, as bold as it is foolish. It must not be that foolish of a strategy, though, because Tyrion immediately begins trying to trick him out of using it, which he does, and that leads to Tyrion's victory. Prince reached for his dragon. Tyrion cleared his throat. I would not do that if I were you. It is a mistake to bring your dragon out too soon. He smiled innocently. Your father knew the dangers of being overbold. Did you know my true father? Well, I saw him twice or thrice, but I was only 10 when Robert killed him, and mine own sire had me hidden underneath a rock. So this is seemingly yet another reference to Tyrion under a rock, under a hill, rock-born monkey demon king, Sun Wukong, etc. His father had him hidden under a rock. But chiefly what's going on here is that Tyrion is working fAegon over from more than one angle at the same time. He's both manipulating his emotions in the chess game as well as manipulating his long-term strategy. And interestingly, Tyrion here is commanding the black Syvas pieces. And since he's playing against fAegon, I think we can interpret this scene generally as showing us Tyrion commanding Dany's forces against fAegon's forces. The dwarf pushed his black dragon across a range of mountains. But what do I know? Your false father is a great lord, and I am just some twisted little monkey man. Still, I'd do things differently. That got the boy's attention. How differently? If I were you, I would go west instead of east, land in Dorne and raise my banners. The 7 kingdoms will never be more ripe for conquest than they are right now. And then a moment later, after that absolutely sensational speech about just how unstable and reckless Cersei is, which is why the Seven Kingdoms will never be more ripe for conquest. Tyrion continues. Go to Westeros, though. Then you are a rebel, not a beggar. Bold, reckless, a true scion of House Targaryen, walking in the footsteps of Aegon the Conqueror, a dragon. So Tyrion is continuing to manipulate fAegon the dragon here, moving him around the game board of the world as easily as he moves his own pieces, and fAegon's pieces, I suppose, around the Syvas board. Tyrion then moves in for the kill. And when she reaches Westeros and meets you for the first time, you will meet as equals, man and woman, not queen and supplicant. How can she help but love you then, I ask you? Smiling, he seized his dragon, flew it across the board. I hope your grace will pardon me. Your king is trapped. Death in 4. The prince stared at the playing board. My dragon is too far away to save you. You should have moved her to the center of the battle. But you said... I lied. Trust no one. And keep your dragon close. Young Riff jerked to his feet and kicked over the board. Syvas pieces flew in all directions, bouncing and rolling across the deck of the Shy Maid. Pick those up, the boy commanded. He may well be a Targaryen after all. If it please your grace. Tyrion got down on his hands and knees and began to crawl about the deck, gathering up pieces. So, will fAegon be eaten by Drogon or just one of Dany's dragons? Perhaps he'll be defeated in battle and fed to Drogon as punishment. And this, of course, would be a kind of reverse parallel for, major spoiler for House of the Dragon, the end of the series if you haven't read Fire and Blood. Skip ahead 15 seconds. A reverse parallel for King Aegon III feeding Rhaenyra to Sunfire. So I say reverse parallel because that'd be Dany feeding fAegon to Drogon. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. But I would guess, and we'll just wait for the spoiler people to get back, that it's more likely to be a scenario where fAegon is trying to ride a dragon, perhaps to try to prove his authenticity, and is eaten instead. Or perhaps fAegon will try to ride a dragon somewhere in the thick of battle. Or perhaps he'll be standing on a parapet of the Red Keep and Drogon will just swoop by and chomp him. And then after all this is done, it might be Tyrion picking up the pieces, if you will, in King's Landing, while Dany goes north with Jon or whoever else to deal with the others. Now, earlier in A Dance with Dragons, when Tyrion was still with Illyrio on his way to meet fAegon, Tyrion actually referred to yet another dragon dream, which I have been saving for just this moment. And in that dragon dream, Tyrion is the one who's eaten by the dragon.
Come, drink with me,
The fat man said.
a scale from the dragon that burned you, as they say.
He poured for them from a flagon of blackberry wine so sweet that it drew more flies than honey. Tyrion shooed them off with the back of his hand and drank deep. The taste was so cloying that it was all he could do to keep it down. The second cup went down easier, however. Even so, he had no appetite, and when Illyrio offered him a bowl of blackberries and cream, he waved it off. I dreamed about the queen, he said. I was on my knees before her, swearing my allegiance, but she mistook me for my brother Jaime and fed me to her dragons.
Let us hope this dream was not prophetic. You are a clever imp, just as Varys said, and Daenerys will have need of clever men about her.
This is all happening, again, before the Syvas game with fAegon. So perhaps Tyrion managed to somehow pass this very clear death omen onto fAegon. Let me know in the comments what you think about who's going to get eaten by which dragon, because that's almost more fun than trying to predict who's going to ride which dragon, who's going to get eaten by which dragon. Because I do think there's going to be a parallel to that spoilery thing that we talked about a few minutes ago. And then just to close out this section, there's a good quote summarizing Tyrion's role as chess master or Syvas master of dragons. Griff made no reply. You will die before you drink, his pale eyes seemed to say. Tyrion had drunk himself blind his first night on the Shy Maid. The next day he awoke with dragons fighting in his skull. Griff took one look at him retching over the side of the pole boat and said,
You are done with drink.
The dragons are fighting in poor Tyrion's head. And as we've seen, that's true. They are fighting in his dragon dreams, in his head. And his entire arc in A Dance with Dragons and the rest of the books will be about him fighting with and against these various dancing dragons. Tyrion has counseled the dragon Jon Snow, he's counseled the dragon fAegon, and he's obviously on the way to counsel the dragon Daenerys. So, like I said at the beginning of Tyrion Targaryen Part 1, this seems like George taking a page from Sun Wukong and Journey to the West, wherein the great sage Sun Wukong, the monkey demon king, is broken out of prison to help guide the heroes of the story, just like Tyrion is broken out of prison by Varys specifically to counsel fAegon and Dany. One interesting thing about Sun Wukong, which seems like it could be applicable here, is that he is very much a free agent. He vexes heaven and hell alike. So he's basically the quintessential troublesome chaos monkey archetype, with his eventual mastery of his kind of wild talents and abilities, no doubt being some sort of commentary, on self-control and discipline and self-mastery. We've all got to get to know but sort of control our inner chaos monkey, or something. So when we think about Tyrion guiding our various dragons, we should think about him as being a bit of a chaos agent, someone who may switch sides at different times, and we've already kind of seen that. His loyalties have already shifted and may shift again. Or perhaps Tyrion will finally learn honor and help tip the balance of the world towards good, as Sun Wukong did. Only time and future books by George R.R. Martin will tell. So let me know in the comments how you think Tyrion's story arc is going to end, as far as further spiraling into villainy, or will there be some sort of redemption arc? Because if he does turn his dragon on the citizens of King's Landing while Dany is trying to, become the legitimate ruler of the people of King's Landing, that could be the kind of betrayal that could lead Dany to casting Tyrion out, or feeding him to her dragon even. So one other last little fun detail on Sun Wukong. It is the Buddha alone, only the Buddha, who has the power to capture and imprison Sun Wukong. And he does that with his universe-sized 5-fingered Buddha palm. So I can't help but notice that it's the kind of Buddha-looking Varys who both releases and helps incriminate Tyrion at the trial. And speaking of crime and punishment, we will close out this 2-part Tyrion Targaryen mega video with this scene from Tyrion's brief visit to Volantis, where he and Ser Jorah approach the severed heads of 3 criminals on the long bridge that divides the 2 halves of the city. 3 heads were on display as well, 2 men and a woman, their crimes scrawled on tablets underneath them. A pair of spearmen attended them, clad in polished helms and shirts of silver mail. Across their cheeks were tiger stripes as green as jade. From time to time, the guards waved their spears to chase away the kestrels, gulls, and carrion crows paying court to the deceased. The birds returned to the heads within moments. What did they do? Tyrion inquired innocently. The knight glanced at the inscriptions.
The woman was a slave who raised her hand to her mistress. The older man was accused of fomenting rebellion and spying for the Dragon Queen.
And the young one?
Killed his father.
Tyrion gave the rotting head a second look. Why, it almost looks as if those lips are smiling. So 3 heads on display, and Tyrion compares himself to the one who killed his father. So we might look at it and wonder if it isn't some sort of Dany, Jon, Tyrion, 3 heads of the dragon thing. One of the other heads was a slave woman who raised her hand against her mistress. That could be Dany launching a slave revolt against the Harpy of Slaver's Bay. And then the older man accused of fomenting rebellion and spying on behalf of the Dragon Queen. Well, Jon did kind of foment rebellion by breaking the rules, the Westerosi laws against Night's Watch commanders taking part in the Wars of Men, because he was about to lead a wildling army against the Lord of Winterfell, even though he's not legitimate. And even though Jon hasn't met Dany to spy on her behalf yet, he did spend an entire book in deep cover as a spy with the wildlings. And we all expect him to ally with Dany and foment some more rebellion with her. You might notice that these 3 heads are being paid court as if they were royals by a bunch of carrion birds, carrion crows specifically, just as our 3 heads of the dragon will be aided by Night's Watch crows against the others. And just as Jon is already the King Crow or the Lord Crow. So where does all of this leave us? Well, with Tyrion Targaryen, 3rd head of the dragon, in my opinion. And again, let me know what you think, but what I've tried to do in these 2 videos is not only to gather all the different kinds of evidence, but also to sort of see the story of Tyrion, son of Aerys and Joanna, as George might have been picturing it from the beginning. I'm pretty sure that most of us have reread the series knowing about RLJ and reading all of the scenes with Jon for sort of dramatic irony when he says, oh, the dragons are all gone, aren't they? Or I wish I had a dragon or 3 up here on the wall. And I've tried to capture that same angle on Tyrion Targaryen in a lot of these scenes, which also involve Jon. So next week, I'm actually going to have a video about a new theory that I came up with on a live stream a couple of weeks ago about there being potentially 3 false heads of the dragon to oppose Dany, Jon, and Tyrion. And those 3 false heads would, of course, say it with me, be fAegon, Stannis, and Euron. And just as Tyrion, Dany, and Jon have a bunch of these scenes where they're doing Azor Ahai stuff, well, so too do Euron, fAegon, and Stannis. And so I think that's what all of this means, is that there's 3 true heads of the dragon and 3 false heads. So if you don't want to miss that brand new for 2025 Ice and Fire theory, then you know what to do. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, click the little bell, make sure the notifications are set to all. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Patreon or joining the YouTube channel as a channel member squisher. And I do read my comments, so when I keep saying leave your comments, I know a lot of YouTubers say that as a throwaway line. I actually do read all your comments, and I do look forward to seeing what people think of Tyrion Targaryen. I've always put it in the maybe pile, and now I'm pretty sold on it. So yeah, let me know, guys. Thanks a lot. See you next week.